They passed him like a shadow. A frail, unshaven man slumped on the hard plastic chair in the emergency waiting room, his tattered coat clinging to him like a final defense against a world that had long turned its back. Nurse Kelly barely glanced at him. Another vagrant. Another nobody taking up space. She moved past him briskly, her arms full of patient files she deemed urgent. The man sat still, his head bowed, his hands trembling as they clutched a crumpled piece of cloth to his chest. The receptionist had told him to wait. Wait. Even though the raw cough scraping his throat spoke of something deeper, something serious. But no one cared to look closer. In that hospital, the unspoken rule lingered in the air like antiseptic. Homeless. Patients come last. Kelly had seen them all. Drunks, addicts, troublemakers. She hardened herself long ago, telling herself it wasn't cruelty, it was triage. Prioritize the ones who mattered. But something about the old man's silence gnawed at her. He never complained, never called out. He just sat there, coughing into his sleeve, as people avoided sitting near him. His name, scrawled in shaky handwriting on the intake form, James Weller. Hours slipped by. She passed him again, this time catching the tremor in his hands as he fumbled with something inside his coat pocket. His breathing was ragged now, but Kelly turned away. Probably just wants meds, she told herself, burying the guilt beneath clinical detachment. She busied herself with other patients, the ones with loud voices and urgent demands. But the man's quiet suffering sat heavy in the corner of her mind. Something about his stillness was different. Not defeated, not desperate, just waiting. James Weller had seen waiting before. He had waited in foxholes soaked with blood and rain. Waited as mortars rained down on frozen Korean hills. Waited for comrades who never made it home. He had once been a boy who lied about his age to serve a country that would one day forget his name. The sounds of war still whispered in his ears, explosions muffled by time, the groans of the wounded, the last breath of the man who'd shielded him from shrapnel with his own body. And now, in the sterile quiet of this hospital, James waited again. Not for glory, not for medals, just for someone to see him. His life had folded in on itself after the war. No family, no home, only memories and the small, worn velvet box he kept in his pocket. Across the room, a young janitor paused as he emptied a trash bin. His eyes briefly met James's, then flicked to the frayed edge of the cloth in his hand. Purple. The janitor hesitated, a faint flicker of recognition in his gaze, but the moment passed. The silence thickened. When Kelly finally circled back to him, it wasn't out of duty, it was because something unsettled her. A question she couldn't shake. Why hasn't he left? Why isn't he demanding anything? Sir, she said, her voice clipped. No response. She reached out and gently shook his shoulder. His coat slipped open. There, nestled in his palm, was the velvet box, open to reveal a tarnished purple heart. Her throat tightened. A flush of shame burned through her. She'd walked past him for hours, ignored him, judged him. And all this time, he'd carried a quiet monument to sacrifice. Right there in his pocket. It was never about medicine. It was about dignity. And she had failed him. A sharp voice startled her. The janitor had disappeared, but moments later, a hospital administrator and two security guards approached quickly. They'd been summoned, but not by her, by the janitor. And when the administrator saw the purple heart in James's hand, his entire demeanor shifted. The security guards stood back, suddenly unsure. The administrator ordered an immediate medical response. Doctors and nurses gathered for lines, oxygen, a wheelchair, but James refused the commotion with a gentle shake of his head. Please. He rasped, barely audible. Just water. Kelly knelt beside him, tears stinging her eyes as she held the cup to his lips. I didn't know, she whispered. His gaze, steady and forgiving, settled on her. You weren't supposed to. Those words hung in the sterile air, heavy and profound. Real service isn't worn on the outside. Some battles are fought quietly, and some heroes never demand to be seen. When they wheeled him away for proper care, the waiting room had changed. Nurses, doctors, visitors, all stood as he passed. In silent respect. A quiet, wordless honor. Guard for a man the world had almost forgotten. And in that silence, Kelly felt the weight of her lesson, that sometimes the greatest bravery lies in patience. Sometimes The strongest voices never need to speak. And sometimes, the people we overlook are the very ones who have carried us all. Where are you watching from? What are your thoughts on this story? Subscribe for more stories that remind us to never look past the quiet ones. They may be the heroes who carried the weight of the world.